Tae-hyun stood in front of the massive window, staring at the stars beyond. The space station rotated slowly and Earth passed by in the distance. It looked so small from here, so fragile. He pressed his hand against the cold glass and wondered if he was making the biggest mistake of his life. Behind him, the door opened. Jae-won walked in, carrying 2 bottles of something that looked like water but definitely wasn't. His best friend had been with him through the war, through the diplomatic academy, and now through this. This impossible situation. "You don't have to do this," Jae-won said quietly. He handed 1 bottle to Tae-hyun. "There are other diplomats, other soldiers. Someone else could take this assignment." Tae-hyun took the bottle but didn't drink. "The Valen Empire specifically asked for me. If I refuse, it insults them. If I insult them, the trade agreements collapse. If the agreements collapse, Earth loses access to their medical technology. Do you know how many people will die without that technology?" "I know the numbers," Jae-won replied. He sat down on one of the strange alien chairs that adjusted to fit human bodies. "I also know you're about to marry someone you've never met. Someone who isn't even human." "Humans have done arranged marriages for thousands of years," Tae-hyun said. He tried to sound confident, but his hand shook slightly as he raised the bottle. "This is just another kind of duty." Jae-won didn't look convinced. "Those marriages were between humans." "Tae-hyun, we don't know anything about the Valen. They keep to themselves. They wear those humanoid suits whenever they're around other species. Nobody knows what they really look like underneath. Maybe they look humanoid naturally," Tae-hyun suggested, "and maybe they don't." Jae-won leaned forward. "I've heard stories. Other species talk. They say the Valen hide their true forms for a reason. They say anyone who sees a Valen without their suit goes mad." "Those are just rumors," Tae-hyun said, but his stomach twisted uncomfortably. He had heard the same stories. Everyone had. "The Valen are part of the Galactic Coalition. They follow the same laws we do. They're civilized. So were we, and we still fought wars over skin color and borders." Jae-won stood up and walked to the window beside Tae-hyun. "All I'm saying is be careful. Don't trust too easily. Remember what they taught us in the academy. Every species has secrets." Before Tae-hyun could respond, a soft chime echoed through the room. A holographic message appeared in the air between them. The ceremony would begin in 1 hour. It was time. The ceremony hall was enormous, built to accommodate dozens of different alien species. The architecture made no sense to human eyes. Walls curved in impossible directions, and the floor seemed to shift colors with each step. Thousands of beings filled the space. Some were humanoid, others were definitely not. Tae-hyun recognized a few species from his studies, but most were completely unknown to him. At the far end of the hall, on a raised platform, she waited. Princess Era of the Valen Empire. Tae-hyun's breath caught as he saw her for the first time. She looked human, almost perfectly human. She had long silver hair that seemed to glow with its own light, and her skin was pale like moonlight. Her eyes were violet, a color he had never seen in human eyes before, but everything else was familiar. She wore a flowing white dress that reminded him of wedding dresses back on Earth, though the material moved like liquid. She was beautiful, impossibly, perfectly beautiful. That scared him more than if she had looked monstrous. He walked down the aisle slowly, aware that cameras from 50 different worlds were recording every moment. This wasn't just his wedding. It was a political statement. Earth's first royal marriage to an alien species. Every step he took would be analyzed by historians for centuries. When he reached the platform, Princess Ara turned to face him fully. Up close, he could see the small differences. Her skin had a faint shimmer to it, like there were crystals just beneath the surface. Her movements were too smooth, too precise. She didn't blink as often as a human should. "Tae-hyun of Earth," she said. Her voice was soft but formal. Each word was carefully pronounced, as if she had practiced human speech, but it didn't come naturally. "I accept this union between our peoples. Do you accept as well?" The translator implant in his ear whispered that her actual words were in Valen, a language of humming tones and vibrations. What he heard was just an approximation. "I accept," he said. His voice sounded steadier than he felt. The officiant, a tall alien with too many arms, began the ceremony. It lasted for hours. Different species had different requirements for recognizing a marriage, and they had to satisfy all of them. Tae-hyun repeated vows in languages he didn't understand. He pressed his hand against Ara's in patterns that meant nothing to him but apparently signified commitment in 17 different cultures. Through it all, Princess Ara remained perfectly composed. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She was like a statue, beautiful and cold. Finally, the ceremony ended. The officiant declared them married in front of the galaxy. Cheers erupted from some species while others remained silent. Taehyun noticed that the Valen delegation, all wearing the same humanoid suits as Ara, showed no emotion at all. The reception was worse than the ceremony. Taehyun had to make small talk with dozens of alien dignitaries, each one asking him questions about humanity, about Earth, about his intentions. Some seemed genuinely curious. Others seemed suspicious, as if they thought he was a spy sent to infiltrate the Valen Empire. Princess Ara stayed by his side the entire time, answering questions in the same formal, careful tone. She never touched him except when protocol required it. She never looked at him unless someone was watching. Hours later, exhausted and overwhelmed, Taehyun finally escaped to a quiet corner. He found a human-style chair and collapsed into it. His dress uniform felt too tight, and his head ached from the translator implant working overtime. Ara appeared beside him so quietly he didn't hear her approach. She stood there, hands folded in front of her, looking down at him with those strange violet eyes. "You are tired," she observed. "Very," he admitted. "The Valen flagship will take us to our quarters soon," she said. "You should rest. Tomorrow we begin diplomatic meetings with the Coalition Council." "Tomorrow," Taehyun repeated. He looked up at her, this alien princess who was now his wife. "Ara, can I ask you something?" She tilted her head slightly, a gesture that might have been curiosity. "You may ask. Why me? The Valen Empire could have chosen anyone. Why did you specifically request a human? Why did you request me?" For the first time that day, something changed in her expression. It was subtle, just a slight narrowing of her eyes, but it was there. Emotion, real emotion. "Because," she said slowly, "humans have a reputation. You are adaptable. You survive in impossible situations. You accept what other species reject." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter. "I needed someone who could accept the impossible." Before he could ask what she meant, she turned and walked away, leaving him alone with his questions and his fears. The royal quarters on the Valen flagship were nothing like Taehyun expected. He had imagined something cold and alien, full of strange technology and uncomfortable furniture. Instead, the rooms looked almost familiar. There was a bed, though it was larger than any human bed and seemed to float slightly above the floor. There were chairs and tables, all designed for humanoid bodies. The walls were a soft blue color that reminded him of Earth's sky, but the air felt wrong. It was too still, too perfect. The temperature never changed. There were no sounds except for a faint humming that came from everywhere and nowhere. It made his skin crawl. Ara entered behind him, and the door sealed shut with a soft hiss. They were alone for the first time since the ceremony. Truly alone. No cameras, no diplomats, no guards. Just the two of them in this alien room, married by every law in the galaxy. Taehyun turned to face her, not sure what to say. Every training scenario he had practiced for this moment suddenly seemed useless. How do you talk to your alien wife on your wedding night? What were the rules? What were the expectations? Ara stood perfectly still near the door, her silver hair catching the soft light. She looked at him with those violet eyes, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. Then something remarkable happened. Her shoulders slumped slightly. The perfect posture she had maintained all day faltered. When she spoke, her voice was different. Less formal, more real. "Taehyun," she said, and his name sounded strange in her mouth, like she was testing out the syllables. "I need to tell you something. Something important." He waited, his heart beating faster. This was it. Whatever secret the Valen had been hiding, whatever reason they needed this marriage, she was about to reveal it. Ara walked to the center of the room, putting distance between them. She wrapped her arms around herself in a gesture that looked almost human, almost vulnerable. "This form," she said, gesturing to her body, "this humanoid shape. It is not my true form. It is a construction. A suit made of biological material that allows me to interact with species who cannot handle seeing what I really am." Taehyun felt his mouth go dry. "I had heard rumors," he managed to say, "but I thought maybe they were exaggerated." "They are not exaggerated," Ara said quietly. Most species find Velen in our natural state to be disturbing, frightening, disgusting. We learned long ago to hide ourselves when dealing with others. She looked down at her hands, flexing her fingers slowly. But this form causes me pain. Constant, never-ending pain. Like wearing clothes that are too tight and too hot, except I can never take them off. Not when others are watching. She raised her eyes to meet his. I asked for you specifically because humans have a history of accepting what others reject. You take in refugees from other species. You form friendships with beings that look nothing like you. You even keep animals as companions, caring for creatures that cannot speak your language. She took a step closer. I hoped that maybe, possibly, you could accept me as I truly am. Taehyun's mind raced. Every instinct told him to be cautious, to think carefully before responding. But he looked at Ara, really looked at her, and saw something he recognized. Fear. She was afraid. This powerful princess from an advanced alien empire was afraid of being rejected. Show me, he said. Ara's eyes widened. You do not want time to prepare? To mentally ready yourself? If we're going to be married, truly married, then I should know who my wife really is, Taehyun said. His voice was steadier than he felt. Show me, Ara. She studied him for another long moment, then nodded slowly. Very well. But please do not run. Do not scream. I am still the same person you married today, no matter what form I wear. She stepped back, giving herself space. Then she closed her eyes and the transformation began. It started with her skin. The pale, smooth surface began to shimmer and crack. Not like skin tearing, but like a cocoon breaking open. Light spilled out from the cracks, a soft blue glow that grew brighter with each passing second. Her body began to shift and expand, growing taller, wider, changing shape entirely. The humanoid suit fell away like dust, dissolving into nothing. What emerged was beyond anything Taehyun had imagined. Ara's true form was massive, nearly 3 meters tall. Her body was composed of crystalline structures that caught and reflected light in hundreds of different colors. She had 6 limbs, not 2, and they moved with a fluid grace that seemed to defy physics. Some parts of her body appeared solid, while others seemed to phase between physical and something else, like energy given shape. Patterns of bioluminescence flowed across her surface, pulsing in rhythms that might have been breathing or might have been something completely different. Her face, if it could be called a face, was a collection of geometric shapes that somehow formed features. Where her eyes had been, there were now clusters of smaller lights that shifted and focused. She had no mouth that he could see, but when she spoke, her voice resonated through the air itself, a deep humming that his translator implant struggled to convert into words. This is what I am, Ara said, and even through the translation, he could hear the tension in her voice. This is the form I was born with, the form every Valen has beneath their suits. Taehyun stood frozen, his brain trying to process what he was seeing. It was alien. Completely, utterly alien. There was nothing human about her, nothing familiar to hold on to. He thought about running. He thought about calling for guards, for help, for someone to explain what was happening. Every survival instinct in his body screamed that this was wrong, this was dangerous, this was something he should fear. But then he looked closer. He saw the way her crystalline limbs trembled slightly. He saw how the light patterns on her body flickered with uncertainty. He realized that despite her size, despite her otherworldly appearance, she was still afraid. Still vulnerable. She was still Ara. Slowly, carefully, Taehyun took a step forward, then another. He walked toward her until he was standing right in front of her massive form, close enough that the light from her body cast colored shadows on his face. Can you still understand me? He asked. Yes, Ara's voice hummed. My translator works in any form. Good. Taehyun reached out and very gently touched one of her crystalline limbs. It was warm and smooth, like polished glass, but with a faint vibration running through it. Then I want you to understand this. You're different from what I expected, yes. You're unlike anything I've ever seen. Also yes, but frightening. Disgusting? He shook his head. No, you're remarkable. The light patterns on Ara's body changed, shifting to warmer colors. You are not afraid? I'm terrified, Taehyun admitted honestly. But not of you. I'm afraid of failing this marriage. I'm afraid of making mistakes that hurt our peoples. I'm afraid of 1,000 things. He smiled slightly. Your appearance is actually pretty low on that list. Most beings cannot even look at me in this form, Ara said quietly. They turn away. They request I change back immediately. Then they're missing out, Taehyun said. He walked around her slowly, studying her true form with genuine curiosity. How do these limbs work? The way they phase between solid and not solid. Is that natural or some kind of technology? It is natural, Ara replied, and her voice carried a note of surprise. We are partially composed of energy as well as matter. It is why we can interact with both physical and non-physical phenomena. Fascinating, Taehyun murmured. And these light patterns, do they mean something? Are they communication? They reflect emotion and thought, Ara explained. Her lights were definitely warmer now, pulsing in what might have been excitement. Other Velen can read them instantly. To you, they would just seem like random colors. Maybe you could teach me, Taehyun suggested. If we're going to be partners, I should learn to understand you. All of you. Not just the humanoid suit. For a long moment, Ara was silent. Then her massive form lowered slightly, bringing her closer to his eye level. The lights on her body swirled in complex patterns. Why? She asked simply. Why do you accept this so easily when others cannot? Taehyun thought about his answer carefully. On Earth, we have a saying. Don't judge a book by its cover. It means that what something looks like on the outside doesn't tell you what it is on the inside. He gestured to her crystalline form. This is just your cover. You're still the same person who stood beside me during that long ceremony. The same person who spoke about duty and honor. The same person who was brave enough to be vulnerable with me. You are unlike what I expected, Ara said softly. Same, Taehyun replied with a smile. But maybe that's not a bad thing. 3 months had passed since the wedding, and Taehyun was learning that being married to an alien princess was far more complicated than he had imagined. It wasn't the physical differences that made it hard. He had grown comfortable with Ara's true form, even preferring it to her humanoid suit. When they were alone in their quarters, she stayed in her natural state. And he found the shifting lights and crystalline beauty mesmerizing. No, the hard part was everything else. Today they were visiting Earth, attending a diplomatic reception at the Seoul complex. Ara wore her humanoid suit, smiling politely as human officials asked her endless questions about Velen technology and culture. Taehyun stood beside her, translating not just words but meanings, trying to bridge the gap between two completely different ways of thinking. His sister, Heejin, saved them from another round of questions by pulling them aside to a quieter corner. She was a xenobiologist, one of the leading experts on alien life, and she had been fascinated by Ara since they first met. You look exhausted, Heejin said to Taehyun in Korean, knowing Ara's translator would understand anyway. Long day, he replied. These receptions are worse than the ceremony. Ara's humanoid face showed a slight smile. She had been practicing human expressions, though they still looked slightly off. Your people are very curious. They ask good questions. They ask too many questions, Heejin corrected gently. You are allowed to tell them no. She turned to Taehyun. Have you eaten today? Either of you? Taehyun realized he hadn't. The reception had started at dawn, and it was now afternoon. I'll grab something from the human buffet. I can eat as well, Ara said, though I prefer to wait until I can change forms. Food tastes better in my natural state. This had been one of their discoveries. Ara could eat human food, but only in her true form. Her humanoid suit had a mouth that worked, but she couldn't actually digest anything with it. It was purely decorative. Hyejin's eyes lit up with scientific interest. I would love to study that process sometime, how your crystalline structure breaks down organic matter. Perhaps another time, Ara said politely, but Taehyun could hear the warmth in her voice. His sister was one of the few humans who treated Ara like a person, rather than a political tool. They were interrupted by a commotion near the main entrance. Taehyun turned to see a group of Velen delegates entering, all wearing humanoid suits. Leading them was Commander Vec, a high-ranking military officer who had opposed the marriage from the beginning. Ara's posture stiffened. Vec is here. He was not supposed to attend this reception. Diplomatic immunity, Heejin muttered. He can go anywhere he wants as long as he doesn't break local laws. Commander Vec spotted them and walked over with deliberate slowness. His humanoid suit looked male, with sharp features and cold eyes. When he spoke, his voice was harsh even through the translator. Princess Ara, how pleasant to see you playing human. He looked at Taehyun with obvious disdain. And your pet, Taehyun felt his jaw tighten, but Ara responded before he could. Commander Vec, I do not recall inviting you to Earth. I go where I am needed, Vec replied. The Empire has concerns about your behavior, Princess. Living among aliens, showing your true form to an outsider. Some say you have forgotten your duties. My duty is to strengthen ties with humanity, Ara said calmly, though Taehyun noticed her hands were clenched. That is exactly what I am doing. By degrading yourself? Vec stepped closer. The Velen are superior to these creatures. We should not pretend to be equals. We should not marry them. That's enough, Taehyun said, his voice hard. He moved to stand between Vec and Ara. You're a guest on Earth. You will show respect or you will leave. Vec laughed, a sound that sent chills down Taehyun's spine. Respect? For humans? Your species barely understands basic physics. You play with technologies you cannot comprehend. You are children pretending to be adults. We're children who survived 2 world wars, created artificial intelligence, and reached the stars on our own. Taehyun shot back. What did we pretend to do exactly? For a moment, it looked like Vec might attack. His humanoid suit tensed and Taehyun's military training kicked in, calculating distances and angles. But then Ara placed a hand on Taehyun's shoulder, a gentle but firm pressure. This is not the place, she said quietly. Vec sneered but stepped back. Of course, we must maintain appearances. He looked at Ara one last time. Enjoy your little game, Princess. But remember, games eventually end. Then he turned and walked away, his delegation following. The reception continued, but the mood was ruined. Taehyun could feel eyes watching them, whispers following wherever they went. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked suspicious. A few looked afraid. They left early, returning to the Valen flagship in orbit. As soon as they were back in their quarters, Ara dropped her humanoid suit with visible relief. Her crystalline form expanded, filling the space with soft light. He is going to be a problem, she said, her voice humming through the air. He's been a problem since day one, Taehyun replied. He poured himself a drink, something strong that Hyejin had given him before they left. Why does he hate humans so much? It is not just humans. Vec believes the Valen should rule the galaxy alone. He sees other species as threats or tools, nothing more. Ara's lights flickered with agitation. He has many supporters in the military. They tolerated this marriage because they thought I would use you to control Earth. When they realized I actually care about you, about humanity, they grew angry. So what do we do? Taehyun asked. We continue, Ara said simply. We show them that cooperation makes us stronger, not weaker. We prove that different species can work together as true equals. Taehyun looked at his wife, this massive crystalline being who could probably tear him apart without effort, but instead chose to be gentle. You really believe that? I have to, Ara said. Her lights shifted to softer colors. Because the alternative is a galaxy where we hide behind our suits forever, where we never truly connect with anyone. That is not a future I want. Over the following weeks, they threw themselves into their work. They attended council meetings together, presenting proposals for cultural exchange programs. Ara invited human scientists to study Valen technology, while Taehyun arranged for Valen observers to visit Earth cities and settlements. Hyejin became a regular visitor to their quarters, bringing samples and questions about Valen biology. To everyone's surprise, she and Ara formed a genuine friendship. They would spend hours discussing genetic structures and evolutionary paths, conversations that went completely over Taehyun's head. But not everything was academic. Ara developed a love for Korean food, especially spicy dishes that made her crystalline body glow brighter. Taehyun taught her about human music, and she taught him about Valen art forms that existed in 4 dimensions. They learned each other's languages, not just the translated versions, but the actual sounds and meanings. They were building something real, something that went beyond political necessity. Then came the night that changed everything. Taehyun woke to the sound of alarms. Red lights flashed throughout their quarters. Ara was already up, her crystalline form pulsing with urgent patterns. What's happening? He asked, grabbing his clothes. Attack, Ara said, her voice resonating with barely controlled fear. Someone tried to kill us. The security system stopped them, but barely. Taehyun's military training took over. Where are they now? Captured. But Taehyun, Ara turned to face him fully. They were not outsiders. They were Valen, 3 members of my own guard, bought by someone who wants this marriage to fail. His blood ran cold. Vec, I cannot prove it yet, Ara admitted. But yes, I believe Vec ordered this. He is making his move. Taehyun walked to the window looking out at the stars. Earth was visible in the distance, a blue marble against the darkness. His home, his people, all depending on this alliance to survive. Then we need to be smarter, he said quietly. We need to expose him before he tries again. And we need to show the galaxy that humans are not weak. How? Ara asked. Taehyun turned back to her, and for the first time since the wedding, he felt like the soldier he used to be. We give them a demonstration they will never forget. The war came without warning, as wars often do. The swarm appeared at the edge of Coalition space, consuming a small mining colony before anyone realized what was happening. By the time the Coalition fleet arrived, there was nothing left but empty husks of buildings and silence. Taehyun watched the security footage with growing horror. The swarm wasn't an army in any traditional sense. It was a living mass of creatures, all connected to a single hive mind moving with perfect coordination. They didn't use weapons. They didn't need to. They simply overwhelmed everything in their path through sheer numbers and terrifying efficiency. 3 more colonies have gone dark, Ara said, her crystalline form dimming with worry. They were in the Coalition war room surrounded by holographic displays showing the rapidly deteriorating situation. The swarm is moving faster than our projections suggested. Commander Vec stood across the room, his humanoid suit radiating smug satisfaction. This is what happens when we waste resources on diplomatic games instead of maintaining our military strength. The Valen fleet could have prevented this if we had not been distracted by human politics. Several other delegates murmured in agreement. Taehyun noticed how they looked at him. Some with pity, some with blame, all seeing him as a liability, a weakness that had left them vulnerable. The Valen fleet is the strongest in the galaxy, said General Malik, a grizzled alien who commanded the Coalition forces. But even your ships cannot match the swarm's numbers. They just keep coming. Every simulation we run shows the same result. We lose. Then run better simulations, Vec snapped. We have run every tactical scenario known to Coalition military doctrine. Malik replied tiredly. None of them work. The swarm adapts too quickly. Their hive mind predicts our moves and counters them perfectly. Taehyun had been quiet through the entire meeting, studying the data, watching the patterns. Something nagged at him, something familiar about the way the swarm moved. It reminded him of something from Earth's history. What if we don't use Coalition doctrine? He said suddenly. The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at him. Vec's expression was particularly cold. Explain, General Malik said carefully. Taehyun stood and walked to the main display. He pulled up footage of the swarm's attacks, freezing frames to highlight specific movements. The hive mind is their strength, yes? Perfect coordination, no confusion, no hesitation. Every unit knows exactly what every other unit is doing. Yes, which is why we cannot defeat them, Vec said impatiently. No, it is why we can, Taehyun corrected. Look at this pattern. They attack in waves perfectly timed, perfectly executed. It is beautiful in its efficiency. But it is also predictable. Because the hive mind makes all decisions, the swarm cannot adapt to true chaos. They can only adapt to logical tactical variations. General Malik leaned forward, interested now. Go on. On Earth, we have fought wars for thousands of years. Against enemies with better weapons, better training, better everything. Do you know how smaller forces won against superior opponents? Taehyun began manipulating the display, showing historical battles from Earth. They didn't fight fair. They used terrain unexpectedly. They retreated when they should have attacked. They attacked when they should have retreated. They did things that made no logical sense, and that confusion gave them the edge they needed. You are suggesting we fight irrationally? Vec said with obvious disgust. I am suggesting we fight unpredictably, Taehyun replied. The swarm's hive mind will try to predict our moves based on optimal tactics. So we do not use optimal tactics. We use human tactics, messy, chaotic, confusing. Ara's lights brightened with understanding. Guerrilla warfare. Is that the term? That is one term, Taehyun agreed. Humans have many words for it. Asymmetric warfare, irregular tactics, fighting dirty. He turned to General Malik. Give me a mixed fleet, human ships and Valen ships working together. Let me show you how humans survived when we should have gone extinct. There was a long moment of silence. Then Commander Vec laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. You want to gamble the fate of the galaxy on human trickery? This is absurd. Princess Ara, surely you see the foolishness of this plan. All eyes turned to Ara. Tae-hyun could see the conflict in her light patterns. She was being asked to choose between her husband's crazy idea and the traditional military might of her people. She moved to stand beside Tae-hyun, her massive crystalline form towering over him protectively. I have learned something in my time with humans, she said, her voice resonating through the chamber. They survive. No matter the odds, no matter the opposition, they find a way. If Tae-hyun says this can work, then I believe him. You would risk everything on faith? Vec demanded. I would risk everything on trust, Era corrected. There is a difference. General Malik studied them both, then looked at the tactical displays showing the swarm's relentless advance. We are losing already. Traditional tactics have failed. I see no harm in trying something different. He nodded to Tae-hyun. You have your fleet. Do not make me regret this. 2 days later, Tae-hyun stood on the bridge of a human destroyer, watching his mixed fleet assemble. 20 ships in total, half human, half Valen. It was a tiny force compared to the swarm, but that was the point. They needed to be fast, unpredictable, expendable. Captain Dong-woo, his old commanding officer from Earth's military, stood beside him. The older man had volunteered immediately when he heard about the plan. Just like old times, Dong-woo said with a grim smile. Outnumbered and probably going to die. Let us try not to die this time, Tae-hyun suggested. Where is the fun in that? Dong-woo replied, but his hands moved efficiently across the controls, preparing the ship for combat. Ara was on her flagship nearby, commanding the Valen contingent. Through their neural bond, created when she had saved his life, Tae-hyun could feel her nervousness and her determination. He sent her a pulse of confidence and felt her respond with warmth. The swarm appeared on sensors as they entered the contested system. Millions of signatures moving in those eerily perfect formations. They have detected us, Dong-woo reported, adjusting their approach pattern to intercept. Good, Tae-hyun said. Let them think they understand us. He opened the fleet-wide channel. All ships execute pattern Chaos 1. Remember, nothing we do should make sense to them. Trust your instincts, not your training. What followed was the strangest space battle in Coalition history. The human and Valen ships moved in ways that violated every principle of naval warfare. They broke formation for no reason. They charged when they should have retreated and retreated when they had the advantage. Some ships flew upside down. Others spun wildly while firing. To observers, it looked like complete chaos. To the swarm's hive mind, it was incomprehensible. The enemy waves came in perfect coordination, expecting the coalition fleet to respond with standard defensive patterns. Instead, they found ships exactly where ships should not be, doing things that made no tactical sense. A human corvette flew directly at a swarm formation, then suddenly reversed engines and spun sideways, firing in a completely different direction. The swarm tried to adjust, but their perfect coordination became a liability. They moved as one to counter the expected attack, leaving themselves exposed to the actual attack. Ara's flagship performed a maneuver that should have been impossible, using Valen technology in ways it was never designed for, purely because Tae-hyun suggested it would confuse the enemy. It worked. The swarm started making mistakes, small ones at first, a wave arriving too early, another wave too late. Their perfect timing was breaking down because they could not predict what the coalition fleet would do next. They are trying to adapt, Dong-woo observed, learning our pattern. Then change the pattern, Tae-hyun ordered. Pattern Chaos 7, no wait. Make up your own patterns. Everyone just do something weird. It should not have worked. By all military logic, it should have been a disaster. But the human crews understood controlled chaos in a way that other species did not. They had evolved in a world of unpredictability. They were comfortable with making things up as they went along. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the swarm retreated. Not destroyed, but confused, unable to coordinate their attacks effectively against an enemy that refused to follow the rules. Tae-hyun stood on the bridge, exhausted and wounded. A piece of shrapnel had caught him during one close call and blood stained his uniform. But they had won. They had actually won. Through the neural bond, he felt Ara's joy and relief. Her flagship was damaged but intact. General Malik's voice came over the communication channel. I do not understand what I just watched, but it worked. The swarm is retreating from 3 systems. You have bought us time. Commander Vek's voice followed tight with barely controlled anger. This proves nothing. It was luck, not skill. Call it whatever you want, Captain Dongwu cut in. We are still alive and the swarm is running. I call that a win. As the fleet began recovery operations, Taehyun finally allowed himself to relax. The pain from his wound was getting worse, but medical teams were on the way. Ara's flagship pulled alongside, and through the viewports he could see her true form through her ship's transparent sections, her crystalline body glowing bright with emotion. You did it. Her voice hummed through the communications. You showed them. We did it, Taehyun corrected. Together. 6 months after the battle, Taehyun stood in the medical bay of the Valan flagship, watching doctors work on his injuries. The shrapnel wound had been worse than he initially thought. It had damaged something important, something the human doctors on Earth could not fix, so Ara had brought him here, to her people's medical technology. The Valan doctors were in their true forms, massive crystalline beings working with instruments that looked like liquid light. They moved around him with surprising gentleness, their many limbs performing tasks that seemed impossible. This will create a permanent connection, one doctor explained, her voice humming softly. We must integrate some of our biological technology into your neural pathways to repair the damage. You will heal, but you will also be changed. Changed how? Taehyun asked. The doctor's lights flickered in a pattern he had learned meant uncertainty. You will have a partial neural bond with all Valan, not just Princess Ara. You will sense emotions from our people, understand us more deeply. It is the only way to save you. Ara stood nearby, her crystalline form dim with worry. I am sorry. If there was another way— Do it, Taehyun interrupted. He reached out and touched one of her limbs. Through their existing bond, he felt her guilt and fear. We are already connected. What is a little more connection? The procedure took hours. When Taehyun woke, the world felt different. Colors seemed brighter. Sounds had more depth. And when Valan crew members passed by, he could feel their emotions like faint whispers in his mind. Curiosity, respect, some fear, some hope. It was overwhelming at first, but also remarkable. While he recovered, news reached them from across the galaxy. The battle against the swarm had become legendary. Other species were studying the tactics, trying to understand how such a small fleet had achieved what massive armadas could not. The term human doctrine entered coalition military vocabulary, usually said with a mix of admiration and confusion. But not everyone was pleased. Commander Vek had grown increasingly hostile. Intelligence reports suggested he was gathering support among conservative Valan factions. They saw the human tactics as proof that the coalition was abandoning proper military discipline in favor of chaos. They saw Ara's marriage as the beginning of Valan cultural contamination. The situation came to a head when evidence finally surfaced. Messages between Vek and the swarm, proof that he had been secretly communicating with the enemy, feeding them information about coalition defenses. The assassination attempt on Ara and Taehyun had been just the beginning of his plans. Vek was arrested, along with 17 other conspirators. The trial was broadcast across the galaxy, exposing the depth of the betrayal. Vek had planned to let the swarm weaken the coalition, then position himself as the strong leader who would save the Valan Empire by abandoning the other species to their fate. Watching the trial, Taehyun felt sick. How many people had died because of one person's hatred and ambition? Ara sat beside him, her true form reflecting the somber mood. My father has decided to abdicate, she said quietly. He believes fresh leadership is needed after this betrayal. The throne passes to me. Taehyun turned to her, surprised. You will be empress. I will be offered the throne, Ara corrected. I have not yet decided if I will accept. Why would you not accept? Ara's lights flickered with complex emotions that even their bond could not fully translate. Because I am caught between worlds. My people expect me to be fully Valan, to put our interests above all others. But I have learned from you, from humans, that there are other ways to live, other priorities. She looked at him with those clusters of light that served as her eyes. If I accept the throne, I will face constant pressure to abandon what we have built, to return to the old ways of isolation and superiority. Taehyun stood and walked to the window. Earth was visible in the distance, a small blue world that had given birth to a species stubborn enough to change the galaxy. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I want to change the Valen Empire," Ara said firmly. "I want us to stop hiding our true forms. I want us to engage with other species as equals, not as superior beings playing at diplomacy. I want what you showed me as possible." Her form brightened. "But I cannot do it alone." "You are not alone," Taehyun said. He turned back to her. "Whatever you decide, I am with you. That is what marriage means, right? Partners facing the future together." Era was silent for a long moment, her lights shifting through a spectrum of colors. Then she seemed to reach a decision. "I will accept the throne, but on my terms, and with your help." The coronation was unlike anything the Valen Empire had ever seen. Traditionally, it was a closed ceremony, attended only by Valen in their humanoid suits. A formal, solemn affair with centuries of protocol. Ara threw out the protocol. The ceremony was held on a neutral station, open to all coalition species. And for the first time in Valen history, the royal family appeared in their true forms. No humanoid suits, no pretense of being something they were not. The reaction was immediate and mixed. Some species recoiled, uncomfortable with the alien appearances. Others were fascinated. A few were openly hostile, demanding that the Valen cover themselves. Ara stood in the center of it all, her massive crystalline form glowing with determination. When she spoke, her voice resonated through translation devices in dozens of languages. "For too long, the Valen have hidden ourselves," she said. "We wore suits and masks pretending to be something we are not. We told ourselves it was for diplomacy, for making others comfortable. But the truth is, we were afraid. Afraid of rejection. Afraid of being seen as monsters." Her lights pulsed brighter. "My husband taught me that fear is a prison. He looked at me, truly looked at me, and saw not a monster but a person. He accepted what others rejected, and in doing so he showed me that we do not need to hide." She turned slowly, addressing the entire assembled crowd. "I accept the throne of the Valen Empire, but I will not rule from behind a mask. I will not pretend to be something I am not. And I ask all Valen to join me in this. Let us be seen for what we are. Let us trust that the galaxy can accept us as we accept ourselves." Silence filled the chamber. Then Taehyun began to clap. It was a human gesture, meaningless to most species present. But slowly others joined in. Humans first, then species who had fought alongside them against the swarm. One by one, the applause spread. Not everyone participated. Some delegates walked out in protest, but enough stayed, enough witnessed, enough cared. After the ceremony, Taehyun's mother, Minseo, approached them. She was an older woman, traditional in many ways, and she had struggled with her son's marriage to an alien. But she looked at Ara's true form without flinching, then bowed slightly in respect. "You are good for my son," Minseo said simply. "That is all a mother can ask for." Ara's lights shifted to warm colors that Taehyun had learned meant joy. "Thank you," she said. "Your son is good for me as well." The weeks that followed were chaotic. The Valen Empire was divided. Some embraced Ara's new direction, appearing in their true forms for the first time in public. Others clung to the old ways, refusing to remove their humanoid suits. But change had begun, and it could not be stopped. Ye Jin's research on Valen biology led to breakthroughs in medical technology that helped both species. The neural bond technology that had saved Taehyun's life became the basis for new communication methods between humans and Valen. Hybrid crews on coalition ships became common, with humans and Valen working side by side, learning to understand each other on levels that went beyond words. Taehyun and Ara established a new diplomatic corps, focused not on political maneuvering but on genuine cultural exchange. They trained diplomats from multiple species in what they called bridge building, the art of finding common ground between radically different civilizations. One evening, they stood together on Earth, in the mountains outside Seoul. Ara had wanted to see where Taehyun grew up to understand his origins. She stood in her true form, her crystalline body reflecting the sunset in 1,000 colors. "Do you ever regret it?" Ara asked suddenly. "Marrying me? Your life would have been simpler if you had refused," Taehyun laughed. "Simpler, yes, but also boring, and probably shorter given the swarm would have won without our tactics." "Be serious." Aura said, though her lights flickered with amusement. I am being serious, Taehyun replied. He moved closer to her, placing his hand on one of her crystalline limbs. Through their bond, he let her feel his emotions directly. Love, certainty, peace. You asked me on our wedding night if I could accept the impossible. Do you remember? I remember. The impossible turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me, Taehyun said. You taught me that different does not mean wrong. That beautiful comes in forms I never imagined. That family can be built between beings who share no DNA whatsoever. Ara's lights brightened until she was almost too bright to look at. You are going to make me cry, and Valen tears are crystalline. They hurt when they form. Then do not cry, Taehyun said with a smile. Just know that I love you. All of you. The diplomatic princess, the fierce warrior, the curious scholar, and the massive crystalline being who eats my sister's spicy food and glows like a supernova. I love you too, Ara said softly. My strange, adaptable, impossible human, the